Yeah, so let me let's say a few things about this. First of all, when the President of the United States says America first, that means that he pursues the interests of Americans first. That is our entire foreign policy. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have alliances, that you're not going to work with other countries from time to time. And that is what the president believes, is that Israel, sometimes they have similar interests to the United States and we're going to work with them in that case. Sometimes they don't have similar interests to the United States. And this example, the most recent Gaza peace plan that all of us have been working on very hard for the past few weeks, the president of the United States could only get that peace deal done by actually being willing to apply leverage to the state of Israel. So when people say that Israel is somehow manipulating or controlling the president of the United States, they're not controlling this president of the United States, which is one of the reasons why we'd be able to have some of the success that we've had in the Middle East. Now, you ask about, sort of Jews disagreeing with Christians on certain religious ideas. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the realities is that Jews do not believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Obviously, Christians do believe that. There are some significant theological disagreements between Christians and Jews. My attitude is, let's have those conversations. Let's have those disagreements when we have them. But if there are shared areas of interest, we ought to be willing to do that too. For example, one thing I really, really care about is the preservation of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Christians believe that that is the site where Jesus Christ was crucified and also that his tomb is right there as well. My attitude is, if we can work with our friends in Israel to make sure that Christians have safe access to that site, that's an obvious area of common interest. I am fine with that. What I'm not okay with is any country coming before the interests of American citizens, and it is important for all of us, assuming we're American citizens, to put the interest of our own country first. That's what we're going to do. That's what we try to do every single day, I promise you. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. I'm the president of our pro-life organization here at Ole Miss, Rebels for Life. And I myself, as the president, am 100% pro-life. And I know you've stated, you being Catholic, that in the past, you've stated that you're 100% pro-life. But since joining the presidential campaign as the VP, you've kind of wavered how you see abortion. So I'm just wondering what your stance is right now.
Sure.
And do you think that someone else's right to liberty trumps someone else's right to life?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your question, and I appreciate the work that you do. You asked the question, do I think somebody else's right to liberty trumps somebody else's right to life? No, I do not. I, in fact, do not believe that. Now, you said, and I'm going to take issue with something you said, just the premise of the question, which is that I've wavered on the pro-life issue. I really do believe that the president has been the most pro-life president in the history of the United States of America. Now, that said, there are two things that I think we have to keep in mind here. Now, one is the very, very hard question of, when we talk about our abortion policy, there are some very, very difficult edge cases. There are cases where you've got, an 11-year-old girl who was raped, who it would be unsafe for her to bring the baby to term. You've got situations where, bringing a baby to term would cause serious bodily harm, maybe death for the mother. That's one of the reasons why we believe in the exception in these cases where you have, again, they're edge cases, they're rare. I think the pro-abortion community would have you believe that's 90% of abortions. That's not true. But we got to be honest about the fact that there are some edge cases. The second thing I'd say about this is that we have to be prudential and practical in what can get accomplished. And there may be disagreements about what exactly that is, but if you look at the pro-life victories that the President of the United States has been able to achieve, he's been able to achieve them because he has worked within the system that we have. If your attitude is you are going to pursue the most aggressive pro-life option, even if it means you lose every election and every outcome means that you're going to be in a situation where the Democrats have abortion on demand up to the moment of birth to the very end. You've got to work within the political constraints that we have. Now, here let me just say something about this. And somebody asked me earlier about my Christian values. And one of the points I made is that when the settlers came to the New World, they found a very widespread child sacrifice. I imagine there are some people who don't agree with my view on the pro-life issue. Let me just make an observation. If you go to historical archaeological sites where there were brothels, and the two oldest businesses in the world are gambling and prostitution, so there were brothels even in very ancient civilizations. If you go back to ancient brothels and you dig up the bones of the women who were working in these places, you will very often find a lot of children who were buried with them. And the answer is that whenever a society decides to discard innocent babies, they also don't treat their women very well. And whenever a society mistreats its women, it is very often the babies who come right after that. There is a reason why Christian civilization ended the practice of child sacrifice all over the world, and it's one of the great accomplishments of Christian civilization. I believe that we should try to be protecting every unborn life. There's a question of exactly how we do it, but I would never say that anyone's right to life should be sacrificed. Thank you, man.
First, I just have to say I'm thrilled to hear you articulate Christian values on a stage like this, and to remind us that things we take for granted and things we value so much have a Christian origin. So thank you for that. I really mean that. However,
so much of liberalism, by the way, so much of the far left is a sort of, if you really pay attention to it, it's a kind of perverted version of Christianity. Like, there's nothing wrong, of course, with focusing on people who are disenfranchised, for example. That's the focus of liberalism. But if you completely separate it from any religious duty, any civic virtue, then that can actually become, for example, an inducement to lawlessness. You can't just have compassion for the criminal, you also have to have justice too, which is why I think that a properly rooted Christian moral order is such an important part of the future of our country. But sorry, I interrupted you, go ahead.
no, amen, absolutely. Now, as much as I hope and pray that we can be a nation of Christians, the idea of a Christian nation scares me. So I'd like to hear your feedback on a pretty nuanced argument here, that perhaps there should be a wall of separation, as at least one of our founders advocated, between church and state at the national level. However, that line can and should get blurrier as we descend to the community level. And perhaps that is actually the system, the structure that our founders gave us when they said Congress shall make no law establishing a religious body. However, states did have close relationships with churches at that time.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a rationale that works? Do you think that is the way we should implement around these Christian values?
So this is a very nuanced point, and I want to just make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page here. So if you go back to the First Amendment, it doesn't say separation of church and state. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. But if you go back to the founding time, there were actually a number of states that had formally recognized churches. So there was the Anglican Church of Virginia. That was the official state church of Virginia. Maryland at the time was the only majority Catholic colony, or at least had a significant Catholic representation of the original 13 colonies. There's a lot there. And yes, I do think that what happened is the Supreme Court interpreted Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion to effectively throw the church out of every public space at the federal, state, and local level. I think it was a terrible mistake, and we're still paying for the consequences of it today. But and I think this is your point, if you were to undo that, if you were to get back to a system actually meant by the founders where Congress is not setting up an established religion, but people in their local communities can kind of do whatever it is that they want to do, I think that would be a better system than what we have today. But I think the most important principle that we have got to remember is you do not have to completely kick God out of the public square, which is what we've done in modern America. It's not what the founders wanted. It's not good for the United States of America. And anybody who tells you it's required by the Constitution is lying to you. Thank you.
Hello, JD. How you doing today, man?
Good. How you doing?
In the wise words of Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Don't feel bad. Neither do I half the time, man.
Okay. First off, yeah, laugh it up. Okay, first off, I just want to say I am a huge supporter of the Trump administration. I was 3 months too late to vote for you guys, but if I could have, I would have. So I'm a huge supporter of you guys before I make my argument.